The Arnold Sports Festival, as it's now known, started out in 1989 and was the creation of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jim Lorimer. The pair had been hosting and promoting bodybuilding shows since the mid-70s, and in 1989 they decided to expand beyond the sport of bodybuilding, and the Arnolds has since evolved into a physical fitness extravaganza with over 20,000 athletes and 80 sporting events. The idea of adding a strongman competition to the growing event was first pitched to Terry Todd by Arnold and Jim in 2001. Terry had expressed his thoughts about the world's strongest man and said that while he admired Barry Frank for the innovation and success of the show, he didn't feel it had adequately decided who was truly the strongest man in the world. He felt that the competition was as much about endurance as it was strength, and gave the example of O.D. Wilson's infamous loss in 1990, thanks to a rather light and very long race that would eventually determine the winner of the title. He also felt that with so many events in the World's Strongest Man, the risk of injury was high, and he suggested that 4 or 5 tests of brute strength could be used to decide who really was the strongest man in the world. Terry accepted the proposal and was tasked with designing and running the first strongman competition for the festival, which would take place in 2002. Terry consulted with Dave Webster and Bill Kazmaier, and together they decided on the best events for the competition and which athletes should be invited. The idea was that they would invite athletes from all 3 of the main disciplines of strength: strongman, weightlifting, and powerlifting. 2 of the 8 spots available would be for other athletes that were outstanding in 2 or more of the disciplines. The events chosen and the equipment used was intended not to favour any particular sport, but instead be equally challenging for all of the athletes. The major names in all 3 sports were invited to take part. Many turned down the invitation, some due to injuries, and others because they were unsure they'd be able to do well in such a competition. One athlete that was carefully considered before finally being invited was the WWE wrestler Mark Henry, who had been marketed in the wrestling world as the world's strongest man. Mark was already a successful strength athlete, having competed in powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting prior to his wrestling career. Mark asked Vince McMahon if he could take the time off to properly prepare for the competition. Vince enthusiastically agreed, but warned Mark that he would need to do well. The athlete lineup was complete, and the first competition, which at the time was called the Arnold Strongman Challenge, took place in February 2002. Now let's take a look at all of the winners of the Arnold Strongman Classic. The first winner of the competition was none other than Mark Henry himself, and behind him in second place was the current world's strongest man, Sven Carlson. Mark put on a truly impressive performance in the first event, the Apollon's Wheel, and then came second only to Andy Bolton in the deadlift. He came mid-table in the Hummer Push and third place behind the 2 strongmen in the Timber Carry. Altogether, it was enough for Mark to take the overall win, and he's since said that he was at risk of being fired from the WWE if he didn't win, so no athlete there was more determined than him. Mark returned to the competition many times, but as a presenter rather than a competitor. The man to win the competition the following year was Lithuanian strongman Zydrunas Savickas. Zydrunas would eventually go on to dominate the competition for many years, winning the show an incredible 8 times in total. At that time, the events at the Arnolds were considerably heavier than the events at World's Strongest Man, and this suited Zydrunas perfectly. Zydrunas was almost untouchable on the Apollon's wheels, winning the event 8 out of the 9 times he competed in the competition. Between 2003 and 2008, Zydrunas had an amazing 6 consecutive wins at the Arnolds, and he was able to win again in 2014 and 2016. One of the truly incredible things about Zydrunas was not only the longevity of his career, but the fact that he was still able to win these major competitions so many years later. 13 years separate Zydrunas' first Arnold's win from his last, and no other strongman has managed to stay so dominant in the sport for such a long time. Derek Poundstone first competed at the Arnold's in 2008, taking second place to Zydrunas. He returned the following year to take the win, and while some may argue that Zydrunas was absent that year, Derek was able to win again in 2010 in a fully stacked lineup that included the strong Lithuanian. Derek had incredible overhead strength, and in 2009 he did a ridiculous 15 reps on the circus dumbbell, which no athlete was able to come close to. He came close to winning again in 2012, missing out on first place by just 1 point. Derek is still, in my opinion, the strongest man never to win the World's Strongest Man, but his wins at the Arnold's and Fortissimus prove that he was one of the very strongest of that strongman era. The next man to win the competition was Brian Shaw, which he did for the first time in 2011. It was an amazing show of strength from Brian, with him winning the timber carry, tying for first place on the max deadlift, and absolutely destroying the competition on the manhood stones when he lifted the 243 kilo stone over a bar 4 times. Brian has since won the competition another 2 times, in 2015 and again in 2017, and has taken second place 4 times. Brian Shaw is without doubt one of the greatest strongmen of all time, having taken multiple wins in every major competition during the most competitive era in the sport. Mike Jenkins qualified for the 2011 Arnold Strongman Classic when he won the amateur show in 2010. Very little is usually expected of the new guy, but Mike surprised everyone when he took second place in 2011. In 2012, Mike was back, and despite dropping points in the deadlift, he made his win look comfortable, taking first place in 3 of the 5 events. Mike sadly passed away the following year, and the huge loss was a devastating blow to the sport. Having already achieved so much in strongman as a relative newcomer, I've no doubt that Mike would have gone on to be one of the greatest of all time. The next athlete to take the win was Vytautas Lalas, who won the show in 2013. While Lalas was already an established name on the strongman circuit, 2013 was his first ever appearance at the Arnold's. He narrowly missed out on winning the World's Strongest Man in 2012, so his Arnold's win was the perfect redemption, and he used the prize money to open his own gym in Ireland where he lives with his family. Lalas was known for his impressive shoulder strength, and the 2013 show was a nail-biting finish, with just half a point separating Lalas and Brian going into the final event. Lalas no longer competes at the Arnold's, but his win was the cherry on the cake of an impressive strongman career. The last athlete on the list is the mountain himself, Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, who won the competition in 2018, 2019 and 2020. Thor first competed at the show back in 2012, where he took last place in the max deadlift and the overall show, a far cry from his performances these last few years. Fast forward to now, and it's rare to see Thor place outside of the top 3 in any of the Arnold's events. In fact, in the last 3 years, Thor has only placed outside of the top 3 once, which was the 2020 timber carry. He was a lowly 4th on that event. Thor has since announced his retirement from strongman, but has hinted that he might be back to compete again at the Arnold's. At just 31 years old, he still has plenty of time to achieve even more great things in the sport. Thor's retirement announcement leaves the door wide open for the 2021 competition. Who do you guys think will take the win? Will Brian Shaw be back for his 4th title? Can the Dragon Martin Zlissis take it for the first time? Or is it time for Mateusz Kiliaskowski to shine? Let me know in the comments below, and we'll be back with more strength action soon. While you're here guys, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my awesome strength content.